right, cool. Sounds like it's coming through. Sorry for the fun slideshow earlier. Just me wrestling with OBS over here. But anyway, my name is Eben Schumacher. I am the art lead here at Unchained Entertainment. And today I'm going to be going through some of the things that I've been working on personally, as well as a few things that just our team has been doing that have been general improvements to the game's visuals and you know, things like mostly going to be focusing on character models and new NPCs and a little bit of environment and UI stuff that I've been involved in and sort of help facilitate as well. Let's see, sound is a little quiet. I can maybe try to crank that up a little bit. Let me know if that sounds better. And so anyway, I just a little bit of background on me and what I've been doing. I've been with Unchained for let's see, almost 3 years now, and I started out as a concept artist, and sounds a little quiet. Let me know if that's still an issue. But okay, sounds good for me. Not sure what's going on your end. Keep me posted. But anyway, so I've been I started out as a concept artist 3 years ago, and started primarily on 2D stuff, creating concept art for various different things, characters, weapons, environments, stuff like that. So and then over time, I started to get a little bit more involved on the 3D side of things. Started to work with our awesome character art team a little bit more, and learned a lot from them as far as like how to approach stuff in ZBrush and Adobe Substance Painter. So I'll be showing some of that stuff today, some of the 3D work that I've been doing, as well as some of the great stuff they've been doing. And then more recently, I've taken on the role of art lead, which involves sort of assisting in production and art direction for the art team as a whole, you know, so including our 3D character artists, our animation team, our environment team, UI stuff, basically anything that goes into the visuals of the game. I'm sort of helping to facilitate and you know, implement personally where possible. So anyway, that's pretty much the background. Please feel free to drop any questions if you guys have any questions about what it is I'm doing. But otherwise, I'm just going to jump in and show you some stuff that I've been working on, that sort of dating back to when I started working on Camelot Unchained. So one of my first tasks basically was to start examining and trying to unify the direction of our realms and sort of the aesthetic for our realms. So this project has been in development for a while. It's gone through many different phases, and so we have, and gone through different artists, of course. So, part of what, I personally wanted to do and what I was tasked with initially was just to sort of see if we can bring this all together and find like a cohesive aesthetic for each of our realms, because a really key element of this game is, being able to have distinct realm identity. So you have these 3 different realms, and you want to pick the realm with which you identify the most, and have the visuals, sort of reflect exactly, what the distinctive aesthetic and feel and theme of that realm is. So a lot of these were, pencil sketches that I was just kind of like letting loose, like I was seeing, if I really wanted to sort of design these things and really like make them distinct from the ground up, how would I visualize that? And a lot of this stuff was later like narrowed in and refined. Like, some of these elements were have shifted over time as we kind of narrow in as a team on what these aesthetics are. But this was just kind of a fun project for me, where I got to explore some of that and get a better sense for myself and for for artwork moving forward of what these realms feel like, essentially, and what they focus on and what their key identities are. And a lot of this stuff went a little bit off the rails. I was experimenting with some like sort of this one is probably the furthest from what we ended up with in terms of a lot of our Tuatha aesthetic, but a lot of the shape language still carries over and has informed subsequent work. Which realm do I align with the most? Man, that's a tough one. I'd probably the TDD, the Tuatha, and of course they tend to be, for me personally, the most fun to kind of mess with. There's a lot of naturalistic sort of imagery going on here, a lot of curves, and sort of we tried to steer away from just like something that was very classically like a very close example would be a lot of sort of elven visual motifs, seen in Lord of the Rings and all that kind of stuff, where there is a lot of natural imagery incorporated into it, but it's all very elegant and refined and kind of a little bit like otherworldly. And this, I think, we wanted to be a little bit more grounded with it. We wanted to, and also incorporate a lot of the Celtic influence that is really, important to the origins of this this realm, and just sort of like more druidy and a little bit kind of a little bit darker and kind of spikier, and I went crazy with the spikiness here, but like a lot of what we developed later, it's just, want to give it something distinct for its identity other than just like, oh, these are the, nature people. And so you'll see some of that kind of woven into some of the armor designs we look at and stuff like that. And this was another one of my initial tasks, was sort of coming up with ways that we can improve our character design. And this again was just sort of my initial pass. This was like, okay, if I were to start from scratch, essentially, what would I want these to look like? And then we work backward from there, because obviously we are dealing with time limitations, we're dealing with technical limitations, and starting everything from scratch it's rarely ever going to be the best way to go about things. So, but I was kind of going through and, taking a quick pass at like, okay, generically, what would their armor look like? How can we kind of unify each realm and at the same time distinguish it from the other realms that characters will be facing? So, we can make sure that every character they choose, no matter how they choose to customize it in terms of their class or their specific race, we want it to feel distinctly Arthurian or Viking. So from there, a lot of the work was to try to unify these designs and punch them up in a way that was going to be time effective, but also like just helps the visuals of our game. So again, these also went through some, different iterations and explorations of, even the human characters, for example. They are, we want them to be very distinct. The original lineup was, we had some fairly generic people that, had some slight adjustments in skin tone and stuff. But, even if someone chose a human player, which is a little bit, less fantasy driven, we want them to feel very distinct and have an identity that fits the realm. So again, a lot of these went through some iterations, just trying to narrow down exactly, again, what that aesthetic is, how it sort of, reinforces the values of that realm, and how and of course we want them to look cool, so that was also a goal of mine. And so these were some of the initial concept passes for the humans, and these were some of the final designs we narrowed in on. Sort of like, the general time, I guess the general look and feel of the game is supposed to be kind of more like medieval sort of northern, general United Kingdom area kind of thing. But I really wanted to kind of push that in terms of how these different characters looked. Vikings a little bit more Nordic, Arthurians a little bit more like kind of maybe Southern European or Eastern European, and the TDD feeling much more kind of Celtic. So this is kind of the final lineup we ended up with. And I will show off a few of the models as well that you'll be able to play as from some of our talented 3D artists here. And let me just load up those in Substance. And again, feel free to drop any questions about any of this stuff as I'm going through. Might take a minute to load in here. But while we're waiting on Substance to cooperate, this is set to sit on top, of course. There we go. Move this away. And this is one of the Arthurian female models done by one of our 3D artists, Armand Journouche. And part of what we were also trying to accomplish with some of these these character updates is to also bring into sort of bring together the style of the game, not just in terms of like the theme and the content, but also like the visual style, where on one end we have like hyper realistic or like sort of gritty, fantasy realism, like kind of more on the Lord of the Rings side. On the other end of the spectrum, we have like, something more like World of Warcraft or Warhammer, which is very, very intensely stylized. And we wanted to shoot for something in the middle where our characters were still readable, from a distance, and expressive from a distance. But, we're also still had a bit of that dark fantasy element to them. And open up another one here. This is one of my favorites in terms of the character models. Again, this one's by Armand. And we can actually see sort of how this came from the concept as well. This is our Viking male, looking properly shredded and battle scarred. And I thought this one came out really great. And let's take a look at the Tuatha female as well. Looks like we also have some questions. Yeah. Let's see. Do the Arthurians also have a small race? Currently they don't in our early access lineup. And also part of the reason for that actually is, part of our design that we want to let's see, how do I put this? We want to design our realms to be not just sort of mirror copies of one another. So, ideally, we don't just want like, oh, there's a big guy on the TDD, there's a big guy in the Arthurian, and there's a short, everyone has their own version of something. We really want them to feel like not just mirror copies. We want them to feel balanced and unique, with respect to one another. So, the Arthurians have, let's see. Initially, we had plans for the fourth race being the Pict, but as you can see here from some of our older passes at that, they were essentially just kind of humans with tattoos, which didn't feel distinct enough from just the base human model. So one of the things that I was tasked with was coming up with sort of an alternate fourth race to add to this lineup. So what I was exploring here was something that we could knock out fairly quickly by using building on our human model, but still felt fantasy, still felt kind of unique, and something that was distinct enough from human to sort of justify it being a completely separate character. So these were some of my initial passes for the Storm Rider, and this is the final design we ended up with. And this was actually one of a handful of characters that I got to work on personally in the 3D space, which I will show some of these off in my own scene in a minute here. Another one that I got to work on was the Furbog. Again, like, we don't necessarily have the resources to be able to create everything from scratch every time. We have to create a huge volume of assets, for different character configurations, and so part of what we have to do is shave off time where we can. So, for example, with these reworks, in order to save on modeling and rigging time, we tried to use as much of the base geometry from our original models as possible. So that meant that like a lot of our changes would have to be in the materials and not necessarily the geometry itself. The head is a little bit easier to work with, so I had some flexibility on that. So we actually had a lot of fun going through some wild ideas for different directions for this guy. And this is the final design we ended up with. That was able to, we can build this on most of the geometry from the previous model, but also give it some new flavor, give it a distinct identity, and a little bit of flair to it, and also a lot of these elements sort of tying in with the naturalistic theme of the Tuatha, using sort of building on these sort of natural materials and weaving them into the character model material. And yeah, this as you can see here, this design was inspired by Ganoderm mushroom, and this one is a little bit more of like sort of some mossy wood. And actually, I will show you what the final result ended up looking like. Again, these I've been able to work on a few of these personally, which has been really fun, to sort of design something from concept all the way to 3D model and in-game model. So this is our male Furbog here. A nice little pose I put him in. And again, let me know if this is chugging at all. My computer is screaming at me a little bit, probably because I have 3 Substance Painter files open. Yeah, it's been really cool to, and also the 3D team has been really super helpful in like giving me tips and like helping, because like I am more recently entered the 3D space, so these were some of the first models I was working on, and it was also like working with that limitation of using a lot of pre-existing geometry for some of these models, and somebody was asking about poly count. We keep it pretty low, as you can see there. We're going to have a lot of these characters on screen at the same time, and that's always going to be a cost. So we're not working with 100,000 polygons here. We have to be pretty efficient with how we do this. Let me get rid of that. Here's our female. Again, you can see a lot of that like kind of mushroom influence there. I had a lot of fun with especially this back and the back of the head and all that kind of stuff. But you can also see like a lot of this stuff is just baked in, which was another unique challenge. Again, like using a lot of that existing geometry and finding ways to use just normal maps and color and specular and roughness and all that kind of stuff to communicate these things without actually changing the silhouette was definitely a tough challenge, and it's something that a lot of our character artists have dealt with. Let me take a look at the chat here. We were looking at the Storm Riders earlier. So, actually, the question was, how does the poly count on substance models get scaled down when you put it in the engine? The poly count doesn't get scaled down. They are allotted. So, like anything, in order to be efficient when they're rendered at engine, we have a series of LOD levels. So the further away they are, the poly count, will go down accordingly. But that's not changed when they go in engine. Let's see. Oh yeah, and this is as you saw earlier. We'll bring up the concept here so you can take a look. This one actually, as we continued to work on these, we started to have a little bit more flexibility in our process. So for some of the later ones I was working on, I was actually, we were able to nudge some of the geometry and expand on the silhouette a little bit in ways that could help improve the look and feel without adding too much extra work for our animation team. And we have our female as well. There she is. I had a lot of fun with this one. It felt like I love doing dark fantasy kind of stuff, and I think, this was an opportunity to explore that a little bit. A character that so they are part of the Arthurian race, or the Arthurian realm. A lot of that I incorporated into everything from their, their crown or circlet design to, their tattoo designs, to, just their facial expressions and demeanor. If we go back to the male, just the design of the beard, it could have been all rough and tumble, but I wanted it to be very square and chiseled, because as we might get to in a little bit, a lot of the aesthetic for the Arthurians it's all about kind of, hard angles and geometric stuff, and the square is sort of a common motif to emphasize sort of their commitment to law and rule and order, and so creating these characters that, communicate that while, being sort of like having a bit of a darker edge to it was a really fun challenge to me. And going back to some of these other designs, another one that I was able to work on was the golem. Our original design had a little bit more of like this sort of furnace kind of reddish look to it, and I wanted to give it something that was a little bit more chromatically diverse, but also communicated some of the origins of the golem, being this sort of creature made of the earth, and so It's funny. Some of my, for whatever reason, some of my initial designs just started leaning like super sci-fi, and I don't know. I had some, help from our art director Michelle to help push it away from that. And what we ended up with was naturalistic enough, but also still fantasy and still had like some sort of magical elements to it. And so can bring that up again. I also was able to work on these models, which was super fun. Again, at this, as I mentioned, we started to have a little bit more flexibility with our geometry. So these rock details I was actually able to sculpt in the low poly, which I think really helps the silhouette overall, and really helped kind of sell that rocky golem kind of look. Take a look at the chat. Cool. And let's take a look at the female as well. This one was also an interesting challenge to like take, that sort of rugged, stone quality and try to, apply it to more of like a feminine form, and pushing that, without pushing outside the limitations of our rigs again, which, because all of our existing animations are built on specific rigs, we have to make sure that all our joints are lining up in the right places and stuff like that. So it's always a challenge for myself and the other character artists to find that balance point between between pushing the design to the place that we would like to see and really pushing the quality of the art, and also like meeting those technical limitations, and doing it all in a reasonable timeline, which, as I mentioned, I started out as a concept artist, but now, a large part of my job is making sure that we are doing these things in a timely manner, and making sure that, we're not spending a lot of time reinventing the wheel, so to speak. Let's see. Golems are in game. Golems will be one of our playable races. So, I think that should be pretty fun. Blender likes to explode. Yeah, I think it's behaving itself right now. So let's see here. I would also like to show off some of the armor stuff that we've been working on. These are from some of our other 3D artists. And let me just open up more substance files. I should probably close out a ZBrush. I don't need that. That might help. I wasn't directly involved in the concept art for a lot of these. I kind of weaved in and out of the process a little bit, but a lot of these were left to some of our other former concept artists. But this is one of our armor models from Nathan Huft, who's one of our 3D character artists, and he also has been doing some great UI work for us as well. So, and a lot of the UI updates that you're seeing in some of our recent updates, and what you'll be seeing in game, he's been really killing it on a lot of that stuff. So we have a multi-talented crew, a lot of people that are doing a lot of different roles and really killing it in all of those. So this is our Arthurian heavy armor. So I want to highlight here sort of the differences in our aesthetic and what we're trying to show with even within the same armor tier. And these are all going to be, craftable. We'll have, different tiers of armors and different styles for each of those tiers. So, there will be a lot of options in terms of what you can craft and customize. But also all of those options are going to, really reinforce the realm aesthetic and the realm identity that you have chosen to identify with, And so, there are heavy armor for Arthurian and Viking, even though they serve the same purpose. They have very different shape language. They have different materials applied to them. This is one from another character artist, Armand Jornush. Did some great work on this one here. And actually, all three of these were from three different character artists, which is kind of a fun. Let me bring up the Tuathan one. Let's see. All these newer models look good. Thank you. I think they came out pretty cool. And yeah, we have some really talented artists working on this stuff. And this is I'm going to crash my computer here trying to run all these at once, but we're going to do it anyway. And this is our Tuatha. Same armor type and tier. This is our type 4 tier 1. So yeah, again, we have a lot of these gentle curves, this very like leaf-like kind of shape language here, a lot of greens and sort of this oxidized gold, which is, even gold for one realm is different from gold, for another. Like we really, really want to emphasize that, like, even similar things for each realm have their own version of that thing. I think these three really were a great example of success in terms of developing a strong aesthetic for each of our realms here. So awesome work. This is from our character art lead, John Young, who is always cranks out great work and is super helpful and has been with the company for quite a while. And I'm going to close these out before I totally crash my machine here. And let's see here. Discard. We've also been implementing quite a few new NPCs. I want to share a few of those that I've worked on that you will be able to fight in game. At our various resource nodes. So, these are things that are contested between, different realms, but they're also, non-player characters that you battle with in order to capture or gain control of those realms in the first place. So, we wanted to, create some fun things to fight, when you're not fighting other players. So I got to design a few of those. One of them that you'll see is the Earth Elemental. We have a few different types of elementals that we have right now that are going to feed into our crafting system as well. So when you defeat them, they will drop different types of resources that you'll then be able to use to craft other things, and the resource is tied with the type of elemental that you're fighting. So we got our earth, we have our fire, we have our void elemental, and I don't have those models up right now, but Armand did a great job on those. You'll be able to see those in game as well. Have a few different variants: chaos, arcane, lightning. So all of these will be sort of a different experience that you'll have to adapt to, and will drop different resources depending upon what type you're working with. So that's been pretty fun. Question: can you show us some animations? I actually, am not directly. I'm not an animator. I will say I assist the animation team with production stuff and work with them to get these through their end of the pipeline. But I actually have no direct involvement in that. So unfortunately, I don't. All their stuff is in Maya, and I have managed to avoid using Maya thus far. I'm more of a Blender guy myself, and I will never change. No, but so I can't preview any of those, but of course, you'll be able to see all those in game when you're there. So this is another one that I worked on, was the bandits, which will be kind of like, I would say, the closest thing to a neutral realm, although they don't, they're not going to be, they're basically just, another NPC, but, in my headcanon, they kind of are this sort of wild tribe that sort of occupies these lands and sort of causing trouble, that has this sort of root in the, ancient, more like mystic interaction with with these magical forces that are shaping this world. And so, these are characters that you'll encounter at various, capture areas, and they'll have their own camps and stuff, which, we've been designing and implementing as well. And this was one that I actually got to work on myself. And the best way to show that is probably bring up the Blender file. Try to nab one of our animated. Yeah, for sure. Bandits. I can show you sort of the full lineup and how, we're sort of separating out these different tiers, which has been kind of a fun exercise. Take a look through the chat while we're waiting. Cool. So yeah, again, I had the fun task of working on these as well. So we have these, different tiers, with all of our enemies and NPC types. There are different levels, of course, as you would expect in a game like this. And we have our boss guys and our lower level guys. So, I've gotten to work on these different variants and sort of building on them and adjusting. This is one of our lower tier archers. And this is our higher tier archers. So just sort of throwing on like a few new, pieces of armor to kind of show that they're leveling up a little bit. Same with our, we have our lower tier melee variant. And then we have our higher tier guy, which I really like this one because he's all decked out in his sort of post-apocalypse war gear here. A lot of ropes in this one. That was a real pain, and I regret it. But these are, I think it was also an interesting challenge to create something that is distinct from our three existing realms. Like we don't want this guy to look like he's Arthurian or he's TDD, so coming up with essentially a fourth aesthetic that we can ascribe to, this group that you'll encounter, throughout the different areas was definitely a fun challenge. So I'll just bring up the Blender files for these. NPCs get closed helms like this bandit. So far, our designs, that's kind of a funny design strategy that a lot of different. Let me turn on some lights here. Do we have lights? Maybe not. Light. Whoa. There we go. Take a look at these materials while I talk about. Actually, he does have a face under there somewhere. I don't think I did. I did end up sculpting a face, but I don't think we're ever going to see it. Let me see here. Just a fun little Easter egg that only you and I know about. He's under there somewhere. There he is. Hi, guy. All right. So, but, you know, a funny thing is this is something people do in design for enemy types all the time, that you're battling, like, you know, stormtroopers in Star Wars, or you know, they tend to obscure the face to make them like less relatable, and it makes it, you know, more like easier for the audience to get on board with bashing them. So that was one thing I just thought of doing, and also like to create this opportunity to give them this like mystical and kind of like very creepy look. You know, especially because like, you know, you sort of are unconsciously looking at this and like, okay, well, if they can't, you know, if they're blindfolded and they can't see, how are they walking around? How are they navigating? You know, it kind of implies that they're using some sort of, you know, magical sense, or like they're tuning into some other sort of, you know, sensory experience that allows them to navigate, and or they're using some kind of, you know, magical sacrifice to give them powers of perception. But you know, these are just things I think about when I'm designing these things, and you know, in addition to just making them look cool, I really want them to communicate these things to the player. So this is our boss guy of the melee variety, and you'll see these guys in there as well. Anyway, we're coming up on a little bit close to a lot of time here, but I wanted to give a chance to address any other questions we have here about what I've been working on, about the art style for a game, about you know, how we go through that process. Anything about that, I would be happy to answer those. I have a few questions that were submitted in the Discord too that I can start with. But of course, feel free to drop anything in the chat as well. And let's see, I'll just leave some cool stuff on in the background. Let me do this guy. Let's see. So, I don't see anything in the chat right now, but yeah, feel free to drop that in there. I'll start with some other questions here. What games or artists have influenced your visual approach the most, and how do you translate that inspiration into CU? Well, like many people, you know, who got into, you know, a lot of this fantasy stuff and concept art, influenced by a lot of fantasy films and games and stuff like that, you know, Lord of the Rings, and I spent some time, and, you know, as far as games go, it's kind of a range. I've found that I've been discriminating less by genre than by just like good art direction. You know, there are a lot of games that I point to that are like you know, really great art direction. That's what tends to inspire me. You know, like the Dishonored series or Half-Life, which aren't necessarily fantasy, but, you know, I draw a lot of inspiration from games and films who are able to create a cohesive vision and, you know, convey things very simply and clearly with their art style. Definitely got into, you know, Elder Scrolls stuff in terms of fantasy. Spent a lot of time in Skyrim and all that, and a lot of that stuff tends to work its way into my work one way or another. But definitely, you know, of course, you know, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, and, you know, I feel like a lot of that stuff comes through here. Although, you know, pushing things in the stylized direction has been more of a recent challenge for me, which has been a lot of fun as well. I'll show some of these other things. These were, this is another one of the the guys you'll be able to play as. It's our version of dwarves, the Dverger. This was a sort of an initial sketch pass I did, and then this is where we ended up with our final design. Let me see if I have our model, which was one from Nathan. Okay. Oh yeah, Dishonored's awesome. Epic raid mob bosses yet, like dragons and legion. We have some higher level enemies, and we're going to keep expanding on that. So we do have like different levels at this time. Here's our Diverger guy from Nathan. Let me get some better lighting on this. Or maybe just turn off shadows. That'll do it. Yeah. And these weird UVs. We don't need to see that. So yeah, there will be, different levels of NPCs you can fight, different stuff like that. And we're definitely going to be continuing to expand on that as we go through. But yeah, there's some great work from Nathan on our Diverger. This is one of our shorter race guys you'll get to play as. And actually, while I'm in here, let me bring up the Lucre Pan as well. This is one that Armand did. Let's see. Yeah. I think these came out really nice. And turn off shadows. Yeah, again, like this, this one was, I think, another example of how like we, found kind of that sweet spot between, like super realism on the one side and super stylized on the other. Again, like this is something we want to communicate well at a distance, since like our player camera is probably mostly going to be somewhere like this, So if we get too like too gritty and realistic with it, a lot of that stuff isn't going to read well. But this reads really nicely from a distance. So great job, Armand. Let's answer a couple more questions here before we wrap up. Let's see. What tools or workflows have you found most effective for managing large-scale asset production? Well, we use a lot of different tools. Our 3D artists, I think John uses 3ds Max, Armand's and Maya. Most of our animators use Maya. As I said, I mostly use, from concept to 3D, I'm using Photoshop, ZBrush, and Blender, and Substance Painter. And that's it, pretty much. Sometimes I'll incorporate some traditional stuff in there. I'll do a lot of these began as sketches in my sketchbook, and I'll bring them into Photoshop. These all started as sketches in the sketchbook, and I brought them in and polished them up a little bit. But that is entirely it. We go from 2D. I do these, finish up these concepts, polish them up in Photoshop, and then ship them on to our 3D artists. Go into ZBrush and sculpt out the high poly, and then they'll either go in Maya, or I like to use Blender, as I said, to do the low poly and retopo, and then we bring those into Substance Painter and give them a nice coat of paint and export the textures and the model, send those on to our animators, and they put those in Maya, do their rigging or skin weighting, and then get them in the game. And let's see. how do you approach building the game's visual identity? I think I discussed that a little bit already, but you know, my main goal is to I tend to err on the side of simplicity, which is difficult in a game where there's, you know, a lot of information, a lot of different players, a lot of things you need to communicate all at once. So that's been a challenge, and also, like, you know, there might be a lot of things happening on screen at once. So how do you sort of create a you know, my goal essentially is to create a cohesive enough aesthetic where, like, even if things start to get super crazy, it's not overwhelming, because, you know, visual fatigue is real, and you know, I think if you just start throwing you know, tons of different colors and designs and aesthetics into one big pot, you know, even if gameplay is really great, you know, it's going to wear on players. And I think that's something a lot of people don't necessarily think about, but it's something I'm always conscious of. You know, even very simple things like with this design, for example, you know, I save my pops of color for very key areas. You know, if we look at everything from the waist down, we look at this nice butt. You know, it's very, you know, I probably went a little too far with this, but it's also the lighting. But for the most part, you know, this is very muted, low contrast, not like the detail is there, but the design isn't necessarily pulling your focus. When we come up to the head, we have these nice pops of color around the eye and these sort of bluish markings, and we sort of gradually integrate that into the rest of the design. I do that with every single character design, anything I'm doing. I want to make sure there are areas of deliberate focus and areas of rest, you know, big spaces where the eye can rest. And so, and that doesn't apply just to individual characters or, and, you know, assets or, you know, buildings. It applies to, you know, the thing as a whole. So that's the really tough challenge, is to take the design as a whole, you know, in terms of the player experience and the layouts and everything, and try to deliver it in a way where it has areas of focus, areas of space, areas of rest, and so that's generally how I approach it. All right, so I think, you know, we're coming up at the end of the hour, so I'm going to wrap it up. But thank you all for joining me for this. I'm glad I got this opportunity to share what we've been working on, and you know, I'm really excited about all this stuff being a game, and about all of the great work our art team has been doing. And you know, thanks also to our art director Michelle and all the other people that are involved in this process. You know, this is a team effort, and you know, our animators and our 3D artists, our environment artists, you know, they're all doing some fantastic work. So I hope you guys will, you know, get to see more of that. And thanks for tuning in.